Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I'm Brian Jewell. I am your host. I'm feeling a little frosty on this mid-March day where winter is trying to make one last comeback here in Lexington, Kentucky. But despite the cold, I'm excited to have you with us. And as always, our promise to you is that we're going to do everything we can to make this investment of your time worth your while. Now, if you are involved in planning trips, especially if you run a team of people in your travel organization, there is a good chance you have some Gen Z team members working alongside you. And if that is the case, you are in for a treat today. We're going to talk to my friend and clinical psychologist, Andrea Mata, who is an expert in what makes Gen Z tick and how you can work with them better. She's going to share what makes Gen Z different than previous generations. We're going to talk about how you can lead your Gen Z tourism professionals in the workplace. And she's going to share some of the Gen Z superpowers that you should be taking advantage of. This is a really helpful conversation. I can't wait for you to hear it. First, though, let's start with some travel news you may have missed. Tour operators are planning their returns to the Middle East. Travel Weekly reported this week that multiple tour companies are announcing plans to resume departures to Egypt, Jordan, and other countries after suspending them due to the war in Iran. According to the article, Intrepid Travel plans to restart departures to Egypt on April 1st. Intrepid has also suspended trips to Oman and Jordan and said those itineraries are on hold until at least April 15th. Other international companies, including G Adventures and the Globus family of brands, have also halted travel to Egypt. Though the country is hundreds of miles away from Iran and the Gulf states, in early March, a State Department official posted on social media that Americans should leave the country. Intrepid told Travel Weekly that Egypt has been one of its fastest-growing destinations prior to the war, with bookings on premium Egypt itineraries up 196% year over year. Since the war began, though, more than 160 American Intrepid customers have postponed or canceled their planned Egypt trips. Well, now before we move on, I want to take a minute and share a little bit of news from us. If you are new to the group travel industry, or maybe just discovering the podcast for the first time, I want to let you know about a resource that is going to be so helpful to you in growing as a travel professional. This is the Start Here page on our website, grouptravelleader.com. You can come to this page and find all sorts of information that is really going to help you progress on your group travel journey. If you come to grouptravelleader.com/start, that is the landing page for new readers, you're going to find a bunch of free downloads that are going to give you incredible amounts of intelligence on the group travel industry. You're also going to find some really insightful articles that will help keep you up to date on what is happening in the industry and how you can become a more successful travel pro. You're going to find highlights of some of our favorite podcast episodes and have a place to sign up for our e-newsletter, the Group Travel Minute. That's also a great place on that page to learn about our on-site familiarization tours and see what kind of FAM tour opportunities we have coming up. Now, all of this is completely free. In fact, everything we do for you is completely free. You can access it all right now at grouptravelleader.com/start. And don't worry, I'm going to drop that link in the show notes as well to make it easy for you to get to. grouptravelleader.com/start. You will be glad you checked it out. Well, it's just about time for us to get into our featured conversation with Andrea Mata. As we do that, let me remind you that if you're the kind of person that likes to watch podcast interviews, you can see the entire conversation between Andrea and me on our YouTube channel. To get there, you can simply go to YouTube and search for Gather and Go, or you can click on the link in the show notes, catch the entire conversation there. And after we wrap up the interview here on the podcast, I'm going to stick around for a few minutes to give you my thoughts on some of the most important things Andrea had to say, because these are points you really don't want to miss. And I hope you will stick around to the end of that wrap up, because after we're done there, we're going to talk about what your competitors are doing to beat you. That's going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. You're definitely going to want to hear that. We'll be right back with Andrea Mata. Hey, group travel planners, what is the number one thing you look for in a destination? Is it fun attractions, good weather, ease of access? Well, whatever you're planning, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina ticks all the boxes. They have 60 miles of sunny beaches across 14 coastal communities, hundreds of attractions that appeal to every age group, and more than 2,000 restaurants, ranging from casual breakfast joints to flip-flop fine dining. Best of all, Myrtle Beach is no stranger to hosting large groups of travelers. The hotels, restaurants, and attractions in the area are used to handling groups, so you can be sure your people will be well taken care of. And that goes for you too. The Visit Myrtle Beach group travel experts are happy to assist planners with every aspect of their trips, and will even help coordinate group hotel rates. Not to mention their complimentary services like customized itineraries, site visits, and fam tours. Whatever you're planning, from a student group trip to a large-scale event like a music festival, bring it to the beach. Start planning at visitmyrtlebeach.com/groups. All right, everybody. My guest today is a clinical psychologist who is on a mission to throat punch the Gen Z mental health crisis. She has spent decades working with parents, students, and coaches to raise adaptable youth and build resilient communities. She's a frequent keynote speaker and media personality, and the author of the #2 parenting book, Practical Tips for the Pooped Out Parent. Andrea Mata, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me, Brian.
I am so excited to have you here. I'm going to resist the urge all day to call you Dr. Dre, as you are known among the community of folks we hang out with. But it's such a pleasure to have you here. You and I met, I don't know, was it 5 years ago? Going on 6 years ago now at an event?
Yeah, we're like 5.5 years because we met in November of 2020.
Yeah, man, that's amazing. That feels like another lifetime ago. Totally different time in the world. You have been working with Gen Z for a long time, before they were adults, before they were the newest thing in the workplace. I'm curious, when you realized that Gen Z has a lot of unique characteristics and maybe some challenges that aren't like the rest of us.
So I was a college professor for 9 years, so from 2012 to 2021. And towards the end of my tenure as a professor, I started to notice like a shift from like these younger millennials, because I'm an elder millennial or whatever. Someone said geriatric millennial. I was like, hey.
I reject that.
I reject that. I am not geriatric. I'll take an elder millennial.
Yeah.
But I started to notice this shift because it was in my last year as being a college professor, I got my very first like formal complaint filed against me as a professor because a student, I like set the expectations. And I was like, okay, this is like, you're taking this youth sport psychology course. The expectation is that you are going to contribute to the discussion every single day. That was like the one expectation for like attendance, that every single day that we have class, like you're going to contribute in some way. It doesn't have to be a lengthy contribution. It just has to be like one sentence about the reading to show me that like you did put in the work.
Yeah.
And this student filed a formal complaint because she was doing it via Zoom, because it was like right after COVID or during COVID, whatever it was. And she filed the complaint because I was docking her points because she was going the whole class period, every single class period, without saying anything. And so like Her mom was involved in the formal complaint process. She was involved. They got the dean of like my college involved. And it was funny because like when we sat down, they're like, oh, well, this is this. And I was like, well, do you, and I looked at the mom and I'm like, well, do you realize that your daughter is known amongst all of the like the senior psych majors as like the one psych major that will not do what any of us are telling her to do or anything that we're expecting of her to do? And she's like, no. And I'm like, well, like maybe you should check the facts before you come at the college professors who are like beloved by everyone else and has never had a formal complaint in 9 years.
Yeah.
So I think that's when I started to notice the shift, where it was like there was a lot more hand holding. There's a lot more moms and dads, mostly moms, involved in kind of advocating for their students, their kids that were college students who were adults. And so that's when I started noticing the shift.
And was that emblematic of something that is a much bigger movement in that generation? Or at the time, did you kind of think, well, I just had one sort of strange family come across my classroom?
I started to notice it a little bit more. And then as I started to get more into kind of, okay, corporations and workplaces and those kind of things. And as Gen Z started going to the workplace, I started noticing more and more trends. And I started noticing like, okay, 10% of managers of Gen Z have said that a parent of one of their employees have called them, like the parents of their employees have called them after like a manager gave the adult employee some kind of feedback. And so it's just starting to see more and more of these trends. And then as I went into being a clinician, now I'm working with Gen Zs. And as they're going into the workplace, I remember one of my clients was like, well, my manager gave me feedback on my report. Like they said, like I needed to change like this one thing. And I was like, okay, so what did you do about it? And she's like, I took a mental health day the next day. And I'm like, and that's not like, it's not like a unique situation. Like 38% of managers of Gen Z have said at least one of their employees have taken a mental health day the day after they get feedback.
Yeah. And it's easy to sit here for me and laugh at that because that's very different than how we grew up and came into the workplace. If it's that common, it's probably not fair to just pin that all on the kids, right? I mean, something or some combination of things have acclimated them to behaving this way. So take us back. I guess Gen Z was born when, like mid-aughts, something like that?
Late 1990, like 1997, I think is their year that they're born. So like late 1990s.
Gotcha.
So they're around like late 20s right now to like 13, 14 years old.
Gotcha. So what has happened between the late 90s and now that has made this a particular weakness or given them this sensitivity or just made them more, I don't know, susceptible to some of these mental health challenges?
So there's two things, and both have to do with the environments that they've been raised in. So the first one is, this will be the hill that I die on, is gentle parenting. So for the last 15, 20 years, parents have adopted a much more gentle approach to parenting because Xers or Gen Xers and millennials, like they were parented using more militant parenting styles where it was like, I'll give you something to cry about, like feelings don't matter,
right.
Rub some dirt on it, that kind of thing. And so Gen Xers and millennials felt unheard. They felt unseen. They didn't feel understood. And so they did the whole thing where it's like, I'm never doing that. I'm never parenting that way. And so what happened was they swung the complete opposite direction and they went into like gentle parenting. Or I was listening to I was watching the Kelly Clarkson show yesterday because Pink was on and I love Pink. And they had a doctor on who like came up with conscious parenting. So it's kind of the same thing where it's like, okay, we're going to focus in on our child's feelings. We're going to validate their feelings above everything else. We're not going to set like high expectations. We're not going to, kind of challenge their irrational thoughts. And then we're going to treat them as if they're our partners. They're on the same equal playing field as us. And then we're going to get rid of rewards and punishments. Like just get rid of all of that behavioralism nonsense. Like just get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so what has happened is then when you go into the workforce, when they go into the workforce, these employees are only doing things when they feel like doing them because they focused on feelings. They're going to take mental health days. They think they should be recruited or promoted within days of being hired. And then the other thing is like they want constant praise, but they can't handle feedback. And so like that's all coming from the gentle parenting movement. And then from gentle parenting and those kind of homes that they were raised in, then they went into schools that are focusing more on like trauma-informed practices, where it's like, again, we're going to focus in on their feelings and we're going to promote these practices where if a child is like overwhelmed or they're frustrated or they're stressed or they're angry, we're going to give them breaks for however long they want. And we're not going to hold them to standards and we're going to cause more and more problems. And so again, focusing more on feelings, not keeping the expectations high. And then again, we're seeing the same things in the workplace, where it's just causing havoc. And I don't even know if I think workplaces are noticing it, but I don't think they understand why it's happening.
Yeah. So this is really interesting to me because part of me expected you to say, well, from the late 90s, we've had 9/11, war in Iraq, financial crisis, COVID, and all these external factors that, were really just a perfect storm for these young people. But you're saying this is all how we've treated them since childhood. So how much do you think global events and real crises have, contributed to Gen Z's challenges?
I think the only one that I would definitely say has had an impact is COVID, because we're talking about they were in like high school.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're like, hey, we're going to, from like high school and like little school, elementary school, junior high kind of thing, we're going to completely isolate you for 18 months.
Right.
And like, we are social beings. We are meant to be social. We are meant to be face to face. We are not meant to have like these screens in front of our faces all of the time. And so their social skills have declined. They're knowing like what the expectations are. So a lot of teachers have said like, essentially there's a 2-year gap now or delay in students' behavior. So like seniors in high school are acting like previous sophomores in high school.
Wow.
And like 8th graders are acting like 6th graders in regards to like maturity and emotional intelligence and like just social skills because of what COVID, and we decided to do lockdowns for 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah. So are you seeing that 2-year lag kind of follow them into the workplace? Like, they get out of school, they get their first job, and it really takes them a couple years to sort of hit that basic level that we would have expected from a millennial at age 22?
Yeah, so like when I was in grad school, I would study what's called emerging adulthood. So it's like 18 to 25 years of age. And we were just like studying it. It was a new developmental stage. And we were like, okay, this is new. And it's essentially just an extension of adolescence. And so this is the time where they're trying to figure out who they are, what they believe, who they want to love, what their worldviews are. But now we're starting to see that emerging adulthood kind of extended even further out. Like those adult responsibilities where they're independent of their parents financially. They have their own places. They have their own cars. They're paying for their own insurance. They have their own jobs, those kind of things. Or they're getting married. They're having kids. We're starting to see that extend out even further than that 25-year period, like age that we were seeing before.
Yeah. So what is a business leader to make of all this? A lot of people in tourism, where our listeners are constantly hiring frontline, people in their first jobs, just out of school. How do you lead these people who may be coming in with a totally different generational mindset than the supervisors who are responsible for leading them?
So the biggest tip that I have for managers, leaders who are employing Gen Z employees is you want to set high expectations, but then you want to pair that with high support. And so you want to be very, very clear and communicate what those expectations are. And you want to label them as like behavioral expectations. So what you and I, Brian, would probably refer to as like SMART goals, right? You want to have the SMART goals laid out for them, and you want to be communicating with them on a regular basis. I usually say, like, get rid of 1 year evaluations, just like get rid of those and move towards like 12-week evaluations where you're sitting down with them for a 12-week period of time and be like, okay, what is your focus for the next 12 weeks? These are the skills that we need you to develop in the next 6 weeks. These are or 12 weeks. These are the expectations we want you to have in the next 12 weeks, and really sit down with them at the beginning, and then maybe a middle point to say like, okay, how are you doing on this? What adaptations do we make? Adjustments do we need to make? And then at the end of the 12 weeks, okay, how did you do? And then you're also like, that support piece is coming in is like, okay, what skills do they not have that they need to develop in order to meet these expectations?
Yeah.
So do they need professional development? Do they need training on how to communicate effectively? Do they need relationship building skills? Do they need like just conversations from like older, employees on like how to dress and how to behave and like what are the values? And so really having communication. And then the other thing that comes with that support piece is purpose. They're very big into purpose, and they don't want to just be another cog in the wheel. They want to know what they are doing serves somebody, it helps somebody. They want to see the bigger impact.
So some of the bosses that people like you and I had, at our teenage jobs, our first jobs, might have said, your purpose is to do what I say and get a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying that's not enough today.
No, because I remember having a conversation with my husband, Jim, during COVID, right? And he was working at a position where he was like supervising 90 people. And one of the things that I instructed him to do, or gave him the tip to do, I was like, hey, because they would make parts, like his people would be making parts for like rocket ships and spaceships.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's freaking cool. I'm like, so what I want you to do is I want you to print out like a picture of the rocket ship and put a square for like whatever position that person, whatever part of the rocket ship that person is working on. I want you to put a square on the rocket ship in space and paste it put it up by their station so that they know that this is the part of the rocket ship that they are going in space. And then maybe when they're doing, launches of the rocket ships or whatever, or spaceships, whatever it is, you have it so that there's an event, right? And everyone is cheering and everyone's like, oh my God, like we did that together.
Yeah.
And so building that community, because that's what they all want. Like they want that community, they want that purpose. And so it's kind of cultivating that culture in your workplace.
Okay, so that's interesting because when I think of mission and organizational missions, it's easy to think of nonprofits, who have a very clear, world improving mission they're trying to do. You think of ministries, churches, NGOs, something like that. But you're saying that in a for-profit organization, there's probably already something really meaningful about the mission, and we may just have to be creative enough to identify it and communicate it.
Yeah, because all companies have values, right? Or they should at least.
Right.
Every company should have a value. So it's like, what are your values and how are you communicating those values to your younger or all of your employees so that there's buy-in? Because that's the thing, this is the generation that if they're not bought in, if they don't see the purpose or the mission of what they are doing, they're going to just say bye-bye and go look for something else, because many of them think that they could make more money as a YouTuber or an influencer than for the job that you're currently employing them for.
Yeah. So now that brings up another interesting concept here. You mentioned all your employees, not just Gen Z. Some people are leading organizations that have maybe some boomers who are still working because they just enjoy it, or they're not financially ready to retire. They've got some Gen Xers who are probably in senior leadership at this point. They've got millennials, working their way up through the ranks, middle management, and then, Gen Z getting started in their careers. I can imagine some leaders saying, well, I could do that and my Gen Z would appreciate it, but my boomers and Xers would look at me like, this is stupid. Like, why are you wasting my time with this stupid feelings nonsense? So do you have any tips for navigating these things in a multi-generational workplace and doing it in a way that doesn't, make the older people roll their eyes and walk away?
I think it's bringing in like intergenerational experts to the workplace and having conversations of like, okay, how are we going to, what's the buy-in factor for the millennials and the Gen Xers and the boomers? Well, you're probably, so for the Gen Z, we know that it's purpose. And okay, so we're going to talk with them, but then how do you get your older your older generations? Well, chances are you're going to focus on things like retention and productivity. And it's like, okay, hey, yes, we have these Gen Z folks and we are talking about feelings and like mental health and like the warm and the fuzzies of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you're all are like, why are we talking about these things? But the reason why we're talking about these things is because we want to retain them. We want them to be productive. We want them to be satisfied, because if they are those three things, then the chances of them leaving the company are less. And then it's not driving your leaders, like your Gen Xers and your millennial leaders, absolutely insane, because you have the Gen Zs bought in, and then they can actually do the work that they love doing because they're not constantly hiring new employees. Because every time a Gen Z leaves, that leaves your higher leadership up to, they're responsible for hiring another employee. And it also costs the company, because it costs, I think Sherm said recently that it's like 50% of their salary.
Wow.
So like if you have someone and you're paying them $50,000, like a Gen Z employee for $50,000, and they're not bought in, well, crap. Like you're going to have to spend $100,000 to replace that one employee. Like, and what does that do for your rest of your morale? And what does that do for your leaders?
Wow. You're so right. And I can attest even to the math of what you're saying. We lost a key Gen Z team member last year. He was just a rock star, and he went on to do other things. And, the process of identifying, recruiting, training, onboarding somebody to take his place was an enormous financial loss. And 50%, maybe more. So you're absolutely onto something there. So we've referenced mental health crisis. Tell me how you define that specifically among Gen Z. Is it Gen Z really is having more mental health issues than other generations have, or are they just more open to identifying it and talking about it and maybe seeking treatment?
I think both are probably true. So I know like statistics talk about that. I think on average, 46 to 50% of Gen Z adults meet criteria for some psychological disorder.
Wow.
Because there's a great book. It's called The Anxious Generation by Dr. John Hyatt, where he talks about like all of these environments that we've raised our youth in have made them anxious and under-equipped for the workplace and just life in general. So I think there has been an increase in anxiety and depression, but then at the same time, they're also much more willing to talk about it compared to other generations. But just because they're willing to talk about it doesn't mean that they understand it. Because I think lots of people are talking about it, but not a lot of people still don't understand what a psychological disorder is and what impact does it have and what impact does it not have.
Yeah. So for that business leader, especially let's say on a small team where you really need everybody to be there basically every day and be productive, if that Gen Z employee comes to them and starts saying, hey, I'm feeling some anxiety, I may need some mental health treatment, some companies cover mental health treatment, what can you do for me? Like how can a leader sort of suss out, is this somebody who really does need to take that break and get that treatment and need all the support I can give them? Or do they just kind of need me to reinforce that expectation and send them back to work?
I think the big thing is like high support, high expectation. So you want to maintain it. Like, these are the expectations. You don't want to lower the expectations, but then at the same time, like, what kind of supports does that employee, like that specific employee, need to be able to obtain those expectations or to reach those expectations? And so does it look like you are outsourcing and you have like a good partnership, like your company has a good working relationship with like local mental health providers? Do you have an employee assistant program or an EAP that's going to pay X number of sessions for each of their employees if they want to do it, where it's not gone against like their insurance or their deductible or something like that?
Yeah.
But I think or like, what other coaching? That's the other thing that I don't think people realize is like, is there a mental health coach that you can bring in to do a workshop on how do we deal with anxiety? How do we deal with depression? What are the fundamentals of mental health? How do we just stay mentally well? And then you're hitting all of your employees and you're not having to invest all of these little things. So trying to go upstream and be preventative. So you're preventing these mental health crises from happening in your employees, I think is the most bang for your buck.
Yeah, that's so smart. Now, you've mentioned parents and the role that parents are continuing to play in Gen Z's lives, even after they get into their professional role. Do you feel like when Gen Z gets into the workplace that they are looking at their employers, managers, leaders to in some ways fill a kind of parental void? And if they are looking for that, is that something that managers should do, or do managers need to say, no, I'm not your mom, I'm not your dad. Let's keep it professional?
Well, I think there's a kind of a relationship that you form and I think that's another big thing when it comes to different generations, because you have some generations that are very much like, let's be relational. You have some generations that are like strong work-life separation. And then you have probably the Gen Zs that everything is just like meshed together and there's no separation whatsoever. Yeah. And so I think part of that, it's like that intergenerational work that companies need to be doing is having conversations about, okay, which employees, where do they stand in regards to like life work balance boundaries? And so like, how much are we sharing? How much are we not sharing about our lives? What kind of relationships are we having? Like professional relationships, what does that look like? What does a professional relationship look like for your specific company? And having those conversations so that everyone is on the same page. It's no different than like companies coming in and doing like DISC assessments or strengths finders or anything like that, where it's like, how do different people communicate? It's now like, how are different people, employees, how do they approach relationships? And how are we going to make that work for our team?
Yeah. So if I've got a 55-year-old employee who kind of keeps to themselves and just wants to be cordial around the office, but not personal, and then I've got a 25-year-old who wants to be very personal, it's okay to have those two different relationships with the two different people.
Yes. Like if you're a leader, it's okay to be like, okay, I know that Sam, the 55-year-old is just going to be like, hey, what expectations do you need of me? Okay, let me do that. Let me punch in. Let me do what I need to do and then get out of here so that I can go live my life. And then the 25-year-old, Chad is going to be like, hey, like, let's do this. Like, do you want to go out to happy hour? La, la, la. And like, it's okay to have different relationships with different people. I think it's just having those conversations and communicating that that's okay.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. We've been rather hard on Gen Z, or maybe I have, at least in our time today. What can you tell us about some of the real strengths they bring to the workplace, and maybe how leaders can set the table for them to stand on those strengths and really shine?
I think one of their strengths, purpose is one, but then the other thing is that they are disruptors, right? Like they are going to, like, that whole mentality of like, this is how it's always been done, so this is how we're always going to do it. I think Gen Zers will be the ones that come in and they're like, but why? Like, why does it have to be this way? Can we do it a different way? And it might, like, some of, like, probably the, like, millennials and maybe the younger Gen Xers will be like, like secretively.
Yeah.
And then you might have the boomers being like, this is how we've always done it. And like, you'll have like different things that you have to maneuver. But I think that's their biggest strength, is that they're going to ask those questions of like, why? And if you're willing to bring them into the conversation, your company is going to be innovative. I know that's a key buzzword right now, like innovative, but you're not going to go the way of Kodak, where they weren't innovating, or Polaroid, where they weren't innovating, because this is how we've always done it. But I think if you really kind of figure out how to incorporate your Gen Z employees into your company, into those conversations, and allow them to be that disruptors, I think your company is going to do well.
Yeah, I love that. So along those same lines, you mentioned Gen Z often wants to come in and expects to take charge rather soon. How much should leaders give them a lot of rope? Or how much should leaders be kind of pulling back on a leash and saying, no, you're not ready yet. You got to pay your dues. We got to put you through your paces before we can give you real responsibility.
I think that is a great, it's a kind of you have to kind of figure it out. It's a teeter-totter, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, okay, I'm going to give you these expectations here, do these expectations well, and then we can loosen the reins. So I think for the first part of them being in your company, you're going to be very, very hands-on with them. And then as you kind of see what skills do they need, how do I need to develop them? How do I need to mold them? And then as they show you that they can do it, that's when you start loosening the reins and give them a lot more freedom and invite them in. And I think you can also do that whole disrupting thing from the get-go. You just have to let them know, okay, in this meeting, you are allowed to disrupt all that you want. In this meeting, in this context, you can do it. But in this other context, we just need you to do what we need you to do because that's what the company needs.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I could keep you here all day asking you these questions. I know you've got other things to do. Before we say goodbye, what is the best way for people to find you, follow you, get more of Dr. Dre?
So I have an email. So it's andreadmata.com, or you can go to brightspotfamilies.com, but probably the first one for speaking kind of thing. And then I'm active on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Great follow on LinkedIn. We will put links to all those things in the show notes. Now, before we let you go, we have some questions we ask everybody. They're just for fun. So off the top of your head, when you travel, do you book window seats or aisle seats?
Aisle. I'm 5'9". I do not and I'm claustrophobic. So the whole thing where I'm squished against the wall and the person next to me, also that middle person is so I will go aisle if I'm traveling by myself. Yeah. If I'm traveling with my husband, I have to sit middle because he's 6'6".
Yeah, you lose that battle to just the DNA of the situation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, he's a tall guy.
Yes.
So what is something in your carry-on that you wouldn't travel without?
What is something? I mean, phone, but that seems like a chapstick, probably. Chapstick, because wherever you go, your lips just get dry. Ugh.
Yeah, you're right. It happens to me routinely when I travel, and then when I'm at home, I rarely ever need it, but it seems like every trip I'm digging into my bag somewhere where is my chapstick?
And then you have 40 chapsticks and you're like, oh, here's all my chapsticks. Why don't I have the one in my carry-on?
I know, right? Well, here's the really embarrassing thing. I think I have one in my carry-on that I probably put there in 2006.
You should probably toss that one.
Yeah. If you're only listening to the show, you should see the face that Dr. Dre made. It was this mix of disgust and concern. Brian, I'm afraid he may get sick.
All the germs and that are just incubated on that chapstick. Oh.
Yeah. Good note. I'll do that. I'll do that as soon as we hang up.
Okay.
All right. So if you had a free airline pass and a week with nothing else to do, where would you be headed next?
Australia. That is an easy question.
Yeah. Have you been there?
I have not. We are actually planning on going there for the Olympics in 2032 as a family.
Nice.
So that we have already started, kind of not really started planning. Like we're like, okay, we're going to go for 2 weeks. The kids are all going to be with us. We probably need to find a travel agent for that because that's just a big endeavor that I don't think either of us want to do.
Yeah, but it'll be the trip of a lifetime. I mean, that's going to be incredible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the last question is, what is one thing you have seen or done on the road that you wish you could go back and experience again with somebody you love?
So for our honeymoon, my husband and I went to the big island of Hawaii.
Nice.
And so we learned very quickly in like the travel guidebooks, like if for us, this is not true for everybody. If it said like it has to do it, like you must do, don't do it because there's so many tourists there. But if it was like, oh, this is kind of like great, like go do that because it was awesome. Like the chili cheese fries, I want to say it was like Susie Lou's or something on the big island. They are by far the best chili cheese fries I have ever tasted in my life. So I'd go back to the big island just for those cheese fries.
Yeah. Well, you're making a pretty compelling case. I may have to book that trip and bring my.
Can I come with you?
Yeah. Get Jim. I'll get Laura. We'll plan that trip, and we'll all bring our elastic waistband pants to accommodate those chili cheese fries. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been wonderful, Andrea. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I sure hope you enjoyed that conversation with Andrea as much as I did. And I want to take a couple minutes and hit some of the highlights of things Andrea said that I think are very important for all of us working in tourism. Now, when I asked her about leading Gen Z team members, she said, you want to set high expectations, but then you want to pair that with high support. And so you want to be very clear and communicate what those expectations are. She said, you want to have smart goals laid out for them, and you want to be communicating with them on a regular basis. And she said you should get rid of the 1-year evaluations and move toward 12-week evaluations. I thought there is a lot of really insightful knowledge here. Many of us come from a background where maybe we had high expectations at work, but not a whole lot of support, and we just had to figure out how to manage that ourselves. Maybe you come from a background where you had a lot of support at work, but maybe not a whole lot of high expectations. And looking back on parts of your career, you might say, I really did not accomplish what I could have accomplished there because I was not given very high expectations. Well, I think this paradigm of Andrea's is the best of both worlds there. Certainly does apply to Gen Z, but honestly, I think it could apply to anyone on your team. And I love this idea of saying, hey, let's not wait a year to have a formal performance review. Let's sit down every few months, talk about how you're doing, talk about what your goals are for the next few months, make adjustments as we go. That way, the employee is not surprised when they find out how you are judging their performance, and you are not having to suffer through a year of someone underperforming before you have a heart-to-heart conversation with them. Now, when we talked about inspiring and retaining Gen Z professionals, Andrea said every company should have values. She said you need to know what your values are and how you're communicating them to your younger employees so that there's buy-in. Because in this generation, if they're not bought in, if they don't see the purpose or the mission of what they're doing, they're just going to say bye-bye and go look for something else. Now, this is really critical, and this is certainly something that is different in Gen Z than it was for many previous generations. For a lot of us, we may have dreamed of having some wonderfully fulfilling job, but we also perhaps for most of our careers didn't think that was something that was all that realistic. But Gen Z doesn't know anything but the expectation of really fulfilling jobs. And so if you are not aligning the kind of work you're giving them to do with some sort of mission that goes along with what they value personally, makes them feel like they're making a meaningful contribution to the world, they're just not going to stay with you because there are too many other opportunities out there to do things that are a values match. This might be a new concept for you, but I really encourage you to dive into it. And if you haven't, figure out how you can articulate what you value as an entrepreneur, what your business values. If you can articulate that, not only is it going to help you retain Gen Z talent, it might actually also help you find some Gen Z customers. And finally, when I asked Andrea about Gen Z's unique strengths in the workplace, she said, Gen Z are disruptors. The whole mentality of this is how it's always been done, so this is how we're going to do it. I think Gen Zers will be the one to come in and ask why. Why does it have to be this way? Can we do it a different way? She said, I think that's their biggest strength. And if you're willing to bring them into the conversation, your company is going to be innovative. This is the age-old trap for anyone who has been in a career field more than, 5 years or so. I certainly find myself, the older I get, finding it easier and easier to just fall back on the way things have always been done. But if you look at the world around us, it's easy to see that the way things were done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, is not cutting it in today's world. And you may not know exactly what you need to change or how you need to change it, but there is a good chance the Gen Z people in your world do. Or if they don't know, at least they have some ideas, they have some suggestions, they have some things they have noticed. So rather than just asking them to pay their dues and stay quiet, give them opportunities to speak into what they see. You don't have to take their feedback, but best case scenario, they bring you an idea that is going to revolutionize your business, make it easier to operate, make it more profitable. And if you do, you will certainly be glad you gave them a chance to give you some input. Great stuff there from Andrea Mata. Well, it's no surprise if you've been involved in travel for a while that there is a lot of competition in this space. In fact, it's likely that there is a similar company to yours in your geographic area that offers similar trips to you, and that you have to compete with those people and other tour companies based all around the country and the world for that matter. You've got to compete with them for customers. And when I think about competition, I think it's worth looking at who's winning and how they are winning. That is going to be the topic of today's Hot Minute. Yeah, that's right. The Hot Minute is the portion of the program where I take 60 seconds to give you my unfiltered views on an issue that impacts tourism every day. And today we're asking the question, do your competitors have a secret for beating you in business? So let's put 60 seconds on the clock and get into it. If you're not investing some time and resources into automating your operations and scaling up your tech, you could be losing to your competitors without even realizing it. For a few years now, we've been talking about all the ways that smart tech tools can make your life easier. But now that technology is so good and so widespread that if you're not using it, I'm afraid you're falling behind. Every hour you spend on manual data management is an hour you can't invest in more meaningful work. And every dollar you spend paying a person to do that work is a dollar you can't reinvest in your business or take home as profit. Now, your competitors who are making smart use of tech are saving those hours and those dollars and using them to beat you on service and pricing. You may not feel it yet, but a year or two from now you will. And by then, it might be too late to catch up. Well, that's the Hot Minute. That's how I see things anyway. Of course, as always, you are welcome to disagree with me, and we can still be friends. And hey, whether you agree or disagree, we would love to hear from you. You can send your thoughts, questions, or the tasks you wish tech would take off your plate to podcast@grouptravelleader.com. I read every email that comes into that account. I really do love hearing from you. And hey, you never know. Your ideas might just be the topic of the next Hot Minute. And while you're in the mood to give us some feedback, would you do me a big favor? Would you go to your favorite podcast playing app? And if you haven't followed the show already, then do it while you're there. And if you could also give us a rating and leave us a review, that would be super helpful. And I'm so thankful to everyone who has done that so far. My thanks as well to Andrea Mata for joining me today. On the next episode, I'm going to bring you a really fun conversation with Austin Coop of Tulane America, who's going to tell you all about how you can have fantastic group adventures on Route 66. You're not going to want to miss that. Until then, though, remember this. At the end of the day, we are all on this trip together, so let's make it a good one. See you next time on Gather and Go. Gather and Go is hosted and executive produced by me, Brian Jewell. Our publisher is Mac Lacey. Our creative team includes Danya Simmons, Ashley Ricks, and Rachel Crick. Our sales team is Talisa Reck and Ashley DeLucia. To advertise on the podcast, call Talisa at 859-253-0455. Gather and Go is a production of the Group Travel Leader. For more information on our podcast, magazines, and events, visit us online at grouptravelleader.com.